Alec, thanks for having me.
Great. I just got over the tongue twister for starters. So anyway, that's the hard bit done. Anyway, as I said, I always take people back to their last year in school because sometimes it's an indication of where they're going to go in their life, but not necessarily. Just tell me, what were you thinking of your last year in school? Had you a plan, or were you going into business, or what were you going to be doing with yourself?
All I was thinking was how quick I could get out. I wasn't a real school lover, but when I was in sixth year, what I wanted to do was to train as a beauty therapist, which I did. Yeah. I trained with Roman Conroy at the time in Dublin, which was fabulous. I really enjoyed it. But as the training went on, I realized really this wasn't the life that the career that I'd always thought I'd love. It wasn't for me.
All right. So, okay, you were going to do something else. Where were you lured off into working?
So as I was training at night, I was working during the day. I landed myself a job with the Construction Industry Federation, which is not somewhere I was on my radar either. So I started as a receptionist there during the day to fund my night learning, and realized actually I really enjoyed it. I really liked it. It was very, very different. And I really got stuck into that quite quickly.
Wow. If I think of beauty therapy and the Construction Industry Federation, opposite ends of the scales, you were dealing with a sort of an all-male area, I would have imagined.
Yeah, very much so. I had a great interest in industrial relations. Actually, I did a study, a course in industrial relations, the College of Industrial Relations at the time. So I had a great interest in learning. I suppose when I realized what I was enjoying, what I was really liking, the learning came easy. So worked my way up along the ladder, so to speak, and was eventually promoted to the Secretary of the Irish Home Builders Association, a job which I did actually for nearly 12 years.
That's fantastic, because you mentioned that you really had to start at the bottom and work your way up, and particularly in a sort of male-dominated type sector. That must have been quite tough.
It was. The stuff of nightmares, but anyway, it was hard. It was in at the deep end for sure. But I suppose if you want to learn how to do something, just get stuck in and get on with it. And I suppose that's the way we had to. I came from a very entrepreneurial family. My father was very entrepreneurial, so it was really just get on. You can shoot for the moon. You can do anything you want if you can put your mind to it. And really, I suppose I always had that attitude.
Yeah, I love that with entrepreneurs. It's yes is the answer. So now what's the question? So just immerse yourself fully into it.
Good one. Yeah.
Doing that. But you seem to have a love of learning of this particular area, as you said, industrial relations, and that must have posed some interesting challenges for you, and to see both sides of an interesting coin.
Very much so. I mean, we're often lobbying various interests, but I mean, particularly say put politicians in terms of strategy and policy for the house building sector. That was something that was ongoing. Things like planning and densities, and unfinished estates was one of my area. Unfinished housing estates was one of my really tricky areas. We used to run an insurance scheme for that, and of course that all came a lot more into the public eye, when the crash came. But it's a very tricky area in terms of negotiating with local authorities, the local authorities' interest, developers' interest, and then trying to get the thing handed over. So that was a really very tricky part of the job at the time.
Yeah, it must have been interesting, because realistically you're just representing one side, but it meant sitting across the table from people probably with totally opposing views, and it must have been quite a challenge how you start bringing them together.
Well, I suppose that's what negotiation is all about. You're trying to get a win-win for everybody without anybody feeling that they've lost, without losing face. So yeah, some very, very tricky negotiations over the years for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And again, of course, the sort of area of work you had, you did a lot of work around events and conferences, which meant a huge amount of organizational skills required as well.
Yeah, so I was very lucky. We had a great team, a fabulous team around me, which made such a difference, great support. Yeah, we did a lot of events. These were in the days when, there was lots of action, there was lots of activity, there was lots of entertaining, there was lots of networking, I suppose. So great variety. We had really interesting time with that. Very busy.
I mean, certainly the construction industry would have been, as I said, very male dominated. It must have been quite interesting with some strong personalities there, and how you manage those as a woman in a male sort of dominated industries.
I never really found it terribly difficult, to be honest. A lot of times I'd arrive out on site or somewhere and they would have been expecting a male because of the Francis. People, they wouldn't have distinguished necessarily between Francis with an E or Francis with an I. So I'd arrive and they'd be kind of hanging around and I'd be wanting to get on with it. And I realized they're waiting for the male to arrive. So that happened many times, and that was just purely, not in any bad way. It just was one of those things, purely the industry that we were in.
Yes, of course. And I mean, things have changed quite considerably over the years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, you were involved around the policy side of it as well, which seemed to keep you interested.
Yeah, we were always making representations to the politicians of the day, both on a local level, but on a national level, to the Minister for the Environment at the time, to the Taoiseach at the time, and really trying to, look at policy, we worked a lot with economic consultants and how the industry, what we needed in terms of planning, in terms of housing numbers, in terms of demand. So it was, and particularly budget time was a very interesting time. We were always making our case at whatever level we could or whatever forum we could do.
I mean, quite the dynamics of those sort of meetings must have been interesting, because on one side, which you would have been representing, are entrepreneurs and business people. On the other side, you're dealing with civil servants who are sort of career civil servants. So that must have been an interesting, dynamic going on.
Grand Canyon stuff, I used to say, in terms of the difference. But we did the best we could. We managed. It was never, it was demanding, and that our members, they always wanted more. And that's what we're there for, was to represent them. And then you're trying to get cohesion in terms of representing all of the interests. And the guy down in Kerry versus the guy in central Dublin, quite different views and quite different demands as well. But you know what? That's all what negotiation is about. We managed. We did the best we could.
It must have been quite interesting from your own perspective being there. So you're sort of stuck in the middle between the two, and watching the shifting sands and how deals get done. Yes,
I'll say no more. What more can I say?
What else can you say? All right, we won't walk you into that one. Anyway,
my lips are sealed.
Your lips are sealed. Good. Discretion has been obviously a good part of that job. So, I mean, life was going to change for you, because you were spent many years there, but you were obviously looking for something else in your life.
I realized glass ceiling was, the days that we're in it, the glass ceiling was well and truly in place. And I realized I could still be there in the same position, many years forward if I didn't make the change. And I had a couple of friends who had started a business in ladies' fashion, of all things. It was just so different for me. But I just thought, I've done this for so many years now. It was time for a change. So I I left the permanent pensionable job and started my own business, and actually really enjoyed it. It was completely different. I had never imagined I'd be self-employed, but started off with that, loved the product, wore the product, and actually found that I was not a bad hand at selling. If I believed in the product, I loved the product. So that was easy to do.
I mean, it was a big decision to leave an organization after so many years, as you said, safe, pensionable job for life. But I suppose in one sense, you were lucky to have an entrepreneurial family who probably were there to encourage you rather than discourage you from doing such a thing.
Not really sure about that part, Alec, but yeah, it happened anyway. My children
right, okay.
My children were small and just starting school and that, and I realized it was tricky. I mean, I had spent nearly 5 years juggling, and it's, I did it. It worked. We managed, but it was, it takes its toll at some level as well. And I just thought, being self-employed, I would have that flexibility to be around for them, summer holidays or whatever, term time, and also be able to choose the hours that I worked. Like, of course, never realizing that when you become self-employed, like, you're never off really, unless you have very strict boundaries. But yeah, it was a good decision. It was a good decision.
Yeah, and that's it. And again, it showed your entrepreneurial spirit in the sense of, I'll say yes, and then let's find out what this is all about. But you believed in the product, and I think that was a key part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose if you really thought too much about it, or about these things, about all the things that could go wrong, would you ever take the step? But I did, and I never looked back, and it was one of the best moves I ever did. And I often used to say to women and men, actually, if you have any hankering at all to do something, just go for it. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? Of course, many people are hindered by financial commitments and mortgages or whatever. And as you might say, you'll always find an excuse. But just if you have any gut feeling or any hankering at all, I'd say go for it.
Yes, you don't spend the rest of your life just regretting not making that move.
Exactly.
You do that. So anyway, women's fashion, you were enjoying it. You were living the life. You were enjoying the product as well, which you got an opportunity to wear. How was that business? What do you think made it successful?
It was just, I suppose, I had a lot of energy. I loved the clothes. I realized I had a flair for styling and fashion and color. And it led me into training. It was all the rage then, Colour Me Beautiful. It was all the rage. So I trained as an image consultant. So I was adding to my, I suppose, my skills. And so I started off again, not really knowing what was involved, but training over a period of about a year. And, again, that led me to places that I never dreamed of. So I developed a really lovely business, Image Matters, which was set up in 2001. And I had a lovely balance of one-to-ones, women, primarily women, but a lot of men as well.
Sure.
Starting. And then I had a corporate end of my business as well, where I worked with, various places like financial institutions, a lot of work in the recruitment sector, and actually the hotel sector, obviously for where obviously they needed to have put on a very professional face in terms of their staff and how they presented themselves. So yeah, I had a lovely balance of one-to-ones and of group work.
Yeah, it's a nice mix, and you're doing something that you love. But as with so many other people out there, finance and recessions come knocking at a door, and so you need to reassess yourself. How did you cope with that?
It's really difficult. Like, I think it was for everybody. I can't remember the year, 2008, 2009, January. I had a really good Q1, mapped out, and lots of work coming in. And literally within the space of 24 hours, everything was gone. And I realized, this is really, can lie down and die, or just get up and get on with it. And, obviously just got up and got on with it as best I could. But it was a whole completely different environment, a completely different business environment. And that's when I started to my networking days, and have to say, was my savior in many ways, because so many people were in the same boat, but found new and innovative ways to do business and to make business and to get on with it. So it was just literally day by day in those days to get the business up and running again.
And it's amazing. A lot of people don't appreciate the value of networking until you're literally forced to actually go out and meet up. But you also don't realize the amount of people that out there.
It's incredible,
and the connections
really.
They have.
It's incredible. I've met the most incredible people through networking over the years, men and women. And I mean, I suppose when we go networking initially, you kind of think, oh my God, what kind of business am I going to get out of this? But you have to go with the mindset of, building relationships, building rapport, finding out what other people need. And it's a two-way thing. And I think too often, actually, we forget that. That everybody is trying to get more business, but you got to listen to what the other person has to offer, and always keep in mind, how can you help somebody else? And I think, from your networking days, what you give out, you get back tenfold, hundredfold.
Yeah. No, you're out there to build rapport and trust. And once you can start building that, then, as you said, you get that sort of reciprocal approach from other people.
Absolutely.
But also, I think you discovered something else which was good about yourself, which you were good at selling, because that's a skill set that not everybody has.
Yeah, I think it really boils down to, do you believe in what you're selling? It's very difficult to sell something that, you don't really like, or you can't really stand over. But, in those days, and in fact, anything I've sold since, if I believe in it, I've always found it easy. I mean, if you really believe in something and you can talk passionately and authentically about it, you know, the other person just won't say that they want it, but, you know, they'll find a way to get it or to buy it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, and I think that's a lesson for everybody there. From your own perspective, then, after all of this, what was in the life of Frances happening next?
So over the years, I was working a lot with women who working on the outside, obviously the image part, and it was wonderful. And I loved that business. Great to see the transformations in people. And then I realized I was working a lot with, say, more women who were, I won't say middle-aged because they're not middle-aged, women in their 30s and 40s and 50s who were maybe struggling a bit with health issues. Weight was often an issue, and maybe women who are coming into menopause, and all kinds of women who were exhausted, women who were really tired all the time. Anyway, long story short, I went and trained as a nutritionist.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's fascinating. So, I mean, obviously, you looked after the outside of women. Now you were starting to look after the inside. That was a new change. Tell me, what were you learning about nutrition that you think was of value, be worth sharing with our audience out there?
I think as business owners and entrepreneurs, we tend to have high energy. You know, we're go, go, go. We're not really great with boundaries, and that, you know, we don't turn the phones off when we should, and we work and we say, oh, just do a little bit more. So we can't outsource our health. And my line is, if you don't look after your health now, you're going to pay for sickness later. You know, we need to mind ourselves. You can outsource your tech stuff and your marketing and your admin and all of that, but you've got to mind yourself. And women are not so bad really at minding themselves, but men are much worse. They just wait till they crash. And you know, they say, I'll be good. It's like they're running on empty. And I mean, you know, if you're running on empty, you're no good to anybody. So you've got to look after your health. Your health is literally your wealth.
So your business now is very much focused on, I suppose, the total package really for both men and women, is it?
I'd like to think so, although clients do often have quite a specific agenda. I have found over the last while, as I've been developing the business, that I'm dealing a lot with women with issues of hormonal issues. So I've specialized in hormonal health and menopause. It's an area which, you know, there's a bit of a stigma attached to menopause. And I remember a woman telling me recently that she mentioned this is pre-COVID, that she was having a bit of a hot flush. She was standing at the coffee station at the water cooler or something, she's having a hot flush. And the two chaps, you know, her colleagues, just kind of, too much information, and walked away. You know, menopause is something that is a natural transition. It'll happen to 51% of the population, but it also affects men in terms of husbands, partners, sons, fathers, brothers. You know, it affects everybody really, but it's a very important part. So I'd say to women, you really need to manage your pre-menopause years to ensure that you transition through it really well and really naturally.
If you were to give some tips, I don't normally go into this, but seeing that we're here, if you were to go into this, what sort of tips would you be suggesting for women, and what sort of age should they be taking this sort of advice on from?
Well, I suppose we won't get too biased here. We'll keep it all general. Let's
keep it.
Let's look at say men and women as business owners. What are the, say, 3 things that I'd suggest that they should do? I think, and so many people have been asking me, what should I do to protect myself from COVID? Get a good night's sleep. If you're not sleeping, you're good for nothing, and it really affects your immunity. It affects your concentration, your motivation. A lot of people say they have brain fog. The second thing is, I'd say, manage your stress. So really notice, do you have a knot in your tummy? Do you have palpitations? Is your chest racing? Do you have a headache? Do you find you get stressed very easily? Manage your stress in whatever way that works for you. A few deep breaths, literally a few deep breaths before you go on that Zoom call, or even sitting at the traffic lights if you're at a traffic lights. And eat well, eat nutritionally good food. That does not mean stuff out of garages and takeaways and junk food. Eat whole foods. And I guess the other thing I'd say now, particularly in these COVID times, is just watch your alcohol intake. It's a short-term solution to, but it's not good long term. So that's really based on business owners and entrepreneurs who just really are go, and really have so many people depending on them, businesses and staff and teams depending on them. They need to mind themselves.
And what are the typical issues you're really finding that have arisen as a result of COVID, as opposed to what would have been normally happening out there? What additional issues are you finding?
The levels of stress and anxiety are through the roof. And unfortunately, we all know that stress is not good for us, but stress is at the heart of so much disease. It's hard to convey how bad stress is for us. So, I mean, it's different for everybody. Some people can seem to handle a lot of stress and some people cannot. It's literally back there to the mindful breathing, just the slowing down, just noticing what kind of people push your buttons, preempting any stressful situations and trying to avoid that where possible. Back to the sleep issue as well. It's a really important one in terms of, if we're not sleeping, we've shorter tempers. We tend to fly off the cuff a little bit quicker. So paying attention to those things, only small things, but they mean a lot. I would say small changes for big results.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are having problems sleeping. So have you any tips around that, how they could get a better night's sleep?
Better night's sleep. Again, turn off the screens in the bedroom. Turn off the screens. Turn off your phone an hour before you go to bed. Now, for some people, that is just unthinkable. I remember somebody telling me recently, an accountant, a guy, he got my email at 4 a.m. I mean, he was looking at 4 a.m. And I said, what are you doing? I know he said, I just get a quick scroll. And like, you couldn't make that up. So turn off the screens and try and not eat or drink too near to bedtime. So try and cut off your eating early and the alcohol. I mean, try and get a few alcohol-free nights a week. So if you're somebody who likes to drink every night, maybe cut it down to 4 or 5 nights. And if you're somebody who drinks 3 or 4 nights, cut it down to 1 or 2. So try and just cut your alcohol consumption. Also for the sleep as well, just to try and dump. I try and say, if you've stuff, your mind is racing, try either write it down to kind of externalize it or put your notes onto a phone. And that means you've externalized, you're not thinking about things that you have to do tomorrow, that you have your day planned. And make sure your bedroom is really dark and really cool.
Right, dark and cool. That's what we want to do that. And what about nutrition? Because I mean, you have qualifications around nutrition as well. What are you suggesting about people there?
So I suppose as a nutritionist, we very much work on personalized nutrition. So if somebody comes to us with whatever the issue, we're person focused as opposed to symptom focused. So we look and work on the basis that the body is always trying to get itself back into balance. So if you give it literally the right food and the right circumstance, it'll bring itself back into balance. So, there's a lot of talk about, say, fasting now and intermittent fasting. That works for some people, but for others it doesn't. So I would say 3 square meals a day, if you can, and try and get a good balance. Try to go for vegetables and fruit. I don't know about you, Alec, but when we were growing up, we were always told, eat your veg, eat your veg.
Yeah.
If you knew the science, yes, all our stuff is science-based and research-based. If you knew the science behind your dark green leafy vegetables and how good they are for you, you would never miss a day again. So eat your veg. That's what I'd say.
Right. I mean, certainly for a lot of people out there, I know the COVID has certainly been going on for quite some time now. So I don't know how they're managing to cope. Have you any other suggestions to help them?
Again, the first thing for your immune system really is sleep. I know I seem to be going on about it. Many people, now there's a lot of research now talking about low vitamin D levels and the prevalence of COVID. So we tend to be deficient in vitamin D purely because of the latitude where we live. We don't get as much sunshine. Vitamin D is made through the skin primarily. Yep. I mean, we do get it in through the diet as well, but primarily it's synthesized through the skin. So sunshine on the skin, but we don't get that really in Ireland. So take a vitamin D supplement, but also get your vitamin D levels checked with your doctor the next time you're having your bloods done. It seems to be one of the areas whereby vitamin D deficiency is like a precursor or a disposing factor for COVID.
Just while we're talking about all of these things, typically what sort of clients are you working with at the moment? And I suppose you're probably having to work remotely because of all of the issues that are happening out there.
Yes, working remotely, obviously given the times that are in it. And I suppose like many businesses, never believed we could have, conducted the business the way we are, given the nature of it. But actually it's worked really, really well. I've had all kinds of clients with all kinds of issues. And I suppose we always, no matter what the issue is, we always look at the digestion. We always look at the gut. You may have heard the expression that all disease starts in the gut. So it's primarily women, to be honest with you. I think, again, going back to what I said earlier, that women tend to be more proactive about their health than the guys who are literally falling down before they kind of say, oh, maybe I need to kind of look at something. Yeah, so it's primarily women with all kinds of issues: stress, weight, anxiety, hormonal issues, of all kinds. So it's quite a broad spectrum.
Yes, and certainly with more and more women having, more and more high-powered jobs in society today, and there must be additional stress being poured in there.
Absolutely. We call it tatty, tired all the time. Tatty, right. Tired all the time. And they're exhausted. They are juggling. I was doing a presentation there a couple of years ago and around a board table, and one of the women, all these high-flying bankers, and she said to me, she kept literally falling asleep. It was an evening presentation, and she said to me, I really haven't slept since the twins were born. And I said to her, oh, really? How old are the twins? Thinking she'd say maybe 3 or 4, 17. You couldn't make it up. And there's who will get very stressed, very tired, very anxious. There's somebody who is really leaving herself wide open to illness in later life, exhausted.
And I suppose the one part of it, as we come towards the conclusion of our interview, we can talk about exercise. And I know you're keen into yoga, so for people who might be interested in that. Yeah,
actually, good point. I was thinking more about the nutrition than when you were asking me. It's so important. I'm a keen walker as well. It's really important to get fresh air every day. And I always say movement. It doesn't have to be high-powered training or anything like that. Any kind of movements, whether you're into, yes, I love yoga, I'm a trained yoga teacher. If you like yoga, that's brilliant. If you're into the gym, that's brilliant. If you like your bike or your walk, whatever it is, but just do it consistently. They say now, even walking out in nature, Alec, go out and hug a tree. I'm sure you've heard of it. They call it green exercise, even literally getting out in nature. A few deep breaths and just appreciating, being mindful and getting into the moment, just noticing what's around you. It's just really important to keep the body moving, whatever we do.
So we're looking for a nice balance between mind and body.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, for our audience, and particularly the women in our audience out there in the world of business, where can they find out more about Frances Jones?
So the website is francesjonesnutrition.ie, and also on Instagram at Frances Jones Nutrition, or Facebook. So easy enough to find.